Hello everyone, my name is Kash and welcome to my 7-step guide to building a Minecraft. In this guide we're going to walk through 7 steps to building a Minecraft. I will explain each step along the way and build an example of how to do it. I've used the 7-step process to build this haunted castle and I'm using it right now to build this circus tent on my survival series. With that being said, let's get started with step 0. So before we get started with the build process, we first have to pick out what we want to build. Whether that be a castle, a haunted house, a mansion, just an idea of what we want to make. I am going to be making a cottage. And with our idea selected, we can get started. The first step is to create a story or a narrative for your build. Now, I've talked about this in another video. There's a card on screen. The story doesn't have to be super detailed. It could just be like a quick sentence, just like a guiding direction of what you want to do. And this is important because this is going to guide our future steps. So I am going to choose to do a fantasy inspired cottage in the woods. Maybe we can add some magical elements, make it nature inspired, maybe even a little witchy. So yeah, this is all of our story. It's not much, but it's much more than cottage. It gives us like a genre we want to go in, kind of like a setting we want to put it in, and maybe some ideas for details when we work on those later. Coming up with a story is really going to take your build to the next level. So with our story put together, we can move on to the next step. Step 2 is to outline the build. This is meant to develop the shape of it and give us something to work with. I like to use wool to do this outlining step because then I don't have to worry about details or colors. I am just focused on the shape. But how do we outline our build? First, we're going to start with large shapes, doing squares, rectangles, circles, just get a general idea of the dimensions of our build. I like to start with the base, then build the walls, and go from there. And then once we have the general dimensions of our build made, I get more detailed. Start adding little alcoves, maybe the roof, really just adding bits and pieces with the walls so that we have something to work with for the next steps. So let's get started on the cottage. I'm going to first build the base of it. All right, and here's a nice little base. Now we have an understanding of how big we want this cottage to be. Now we have the walls, and something that's nice about this step is that if you don't like a part of your build, you can easily get rid of some wool and replace it. All right, here's the outline cottage. As you can see, we use different types of wool for the different parts of the build. So the yellow is going to be for the main structure. This will be out of one material. And then the orange wool is going to be for the roof. And we have a little chimney. As we talked about earlier, there's not a ton of detail going on. We just have the general structure that we want, and that is great for this step. Step 3 is to fill in our outline. So we have a general idea of what we want to make, but it doesn't look anything like our end product. So what we're going to do is take the blocks we want to create our build with and start adding walls, roofs, maybe some windows, doorways, make this feel more like our idea in mind. And remember, we are not worrying about details in this step. We are just trying to add blocks that resemble our final cottage to replace the wool. And look at that, we have filled in our outline and now we have a cottage going. This is very basic right now. We don't have much texturing, much detail on the outside. It's a very like flat build in terms of like these walls, but we're getting somewhere. Step 4 is to do the structural details. This is going to take your filled in outline from the previous step and turn this into your build. In this case, we're going to turn this basic structure into a full cottage. It won't quite be a fantasy cottage in the woods with magical elements, but it is going to be a cottage. In this step, we're going to add doors, windows, details on the walls, and do any texturing or gradients we want. I think it'd be best if we do this step together so I can show you how you do it. Okay, first of all, I want to retexture the white surface of this build. It's just a little bit too bland, so I picked out some blocks, and we can just start replacing some blocks in the calcite here and there. And now that I'm looking at it, I think this birch wood is just a little bit too bright. So we are going to adjust and go from there. And remember, you're always going to be testing stuff. You'll rarely get it perfect first try, so if you don't like something, just get rid of it and try again. It's perfectly fine. I think something I'm going to try is to do a bit of a gradient. Make it look like dirt has accumulated at the bottom of the build, but left the top pretty clean. Alright, we're getting somewhere. And let's turn our attention to the roof. Again, looking a bit boring, let's experiment a bit. We're just trying to show that this cottage has been out here for a while, a little bit worn down, you know? We don't want to overdo it with textures, but we want to make this look interesting and dynamic. And of course we can do this dark trim. Alright, so I feel like we've detailed the structure. Now we need to kind of fill in the gaps. So like these windows right here, yeah, that's not going to cut it. We need to add some sort of shutters or cover or windowsill or something like that. Okay, here's an idea. What if we did a little like covered portico, like kind of garden area right here? I think that could look really cool. Okay, trust the process. Wait, actually though, why is this so cute? I love this. But we still have to fix the windows. Let's do that. Alright, now we got some windows and a nice doorway. Now it's just little details like paths, little stone areas right here, adding a balcony, and we are done. So just like that, we are done. Look at how amazing this looks. This truly feels like a cottage. Although not quite what we want. Now, adding structural details might not be as drastic for you, but that is perfectly fine. You just want to go from blank walls and blank surfaces to something that's interesting and detailed, and you just gotta be honest with yourself. Try new things. If you like it, great. If not, redo it and just keep doing that and you'll get a build you love. Now that's the structural detail down, so let's go to step 5. Step 5 is to add the story details to your build. This is going to be the most important step in bringing your build to life. The good thing is you already helped yourself out with this step. Go back to the story from step 1 and read through it again. You want to ask yourself, what could you do for each element to bring it into your build? For example, this cottage is lacking nature elements, so what I could do is add vines growing up the side of the cottage, maybe add a gardening area right here. For the magical elements, I could add a burst of magic coming out of the house like a spell gone wrong. You really just want to have fun with this step. This is what is going to make it your build, make it your stories, so get creative, get wild, and just try new things and see how they go. Let's see what I can do with this cottage. See what I mean by adding wild details? In terms of nature-inspired details I added, it was mainly this garden area, just adding a lot of flowers, workbenches, things like that, and some pots along the windowsills around the outside of the cottage. And it's pretty obvious what I did for the magical bits. I added this explosion coming out of the house. And for anyone curious, this is made out of stained glass panes. Also, I toned back some of the details on the roof and the trim just because it felt like a bit much. Because we're doing 2 detail steps, you just want to make sure you're not overdoing the detail and making your build visually overwhelming. It's an art, not a science, so it takes a little bit of practice. So yeah, those are some pretty good story details. Let's move on to the next step. Step 6 is to build the interior. We've mostly completed the outside, so we can move in now. Ultimately, building the interior is going to look pretty similar to what we did with the exterior. You're going to outline your interior, fill it in, add structural details, then story details. So let's go through this process real quick. Here's an outline, the build filled in, here are the structural details, and finally the story details. I love how this came together. I love how we managed to tie in the big explosion outside to inside with this exploding cauldron. And we just have a lot of like magical, like brewing stuff up here. And then downstairs we have an interior that you'd expect for a cottage. It fits with the story pretty well. Alright everyone, last but not least, we have step 7. The environment. This is the home stretch, and in many cases, you're not going to have to do too much. You're just trying to create a setting that makes your build fit in. When building the environment, it helps to look back at the story you came up with at the start of this process and see if you have any hints or ideas for what your setting could be. In the case of the cottage, I described it as a cottage in the woods, so I just need to build woods around the cottage. Like we talked earlier about over detailing your builds, you don't want the setting to be super detailed. You want to create a background that makes your build fit in with the rest of the landscape, but nothing too fancy. Oftentimes, placing saplings and making a little path is good enough. You really don't need to worry about it too much. We can do that real quick. This is what we get. As you can see, we just added some trees, a little bit of grass and dirt around the edges of the house. But other than that, that's about it. It's simple, but it makes this cottage feel more like it's in the woods and a little bit more cozy. So yeah, that was 7 steps to go from the idea of a cottage to this full-blown build that looks amazing. And while it takes time to get good at the 7-step process, believe me, I am still learning. Once you figure out how it works, you are going to be building amazing things. But anyways, everyone, that is going to wrap up our video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. Comment below what you build with this 7-step process. I'd love to see what you do. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm trying to grow an awesome community, so I'd love to have you be a part of it. With that being said, thank you so much for watching everybody, and have a great day!